guys, it's Sam and this is my June wrap-up. June was a surprisingly good reading month. I didn't realize how many books I actually ended up reading this month. I read 12 books in total. 3 of those were audiobooks and the rest were full-size novels, so I think I did a pretty good job, so let's get into it. The first book I picked up this month was Everything Everything by Nicola Yoon. This is an arc that I got at BEA. This comes out in September. A lot of people I'm talking about this has been getting very hyped, but it is a YA contemporary story about a girl who is allergic to everything. So she is kept inside by her mother basically her entire life because her mother's a doctor and takes care of her. And one day a boy moves next door and everything kind of takes off from there. It's a very fast-paced read. As I said, a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people have been really enjoying it. I also really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars and a review will be coming closer to release date. The second book that I picked up was Armada by Ernest Cline. This one comes out in July, actually very soon now. This was an arc that I also got from BEA and has since been shipped over to Kristen from Kappa A9X because I got it for her at BEA, but I read it first before I sent it over to her. This is Ernest Cline's second novel and it is about a guy who plays video games. He plays this video game called Armada, which is basically an alien fighting kind of video game, and one day he sees the alien ship from the video game hovering over his school. And everything kind of takes off from there. I enjoyed this, but I thought it could have been better. I felt like it was a lot more plot-driven than character-driven. As you guys know, I prefer to kind of have either a mix of both or be more character-driven, so I didn't enjoy this as much as I was hoping. Yes, it is steeped full of geeky references and sci-fi references and gaming references and stuff like that, so if you read Ready Player One, I'm sure you will enjoy this. I have not read Ready Player One yet, but it is on hold at my library for audiobooks, so I can't compare the two, but it was very fast-paced. It would make an excellent movie, but I felt like it could have gone in different directions and kind of subverted the tropes that it was using, which is what I thought it was going to do, and it ended up kind of following a very typical science fiction alien type movie setting. So I didn't enjoy this as much as I was hoping to, but I did ultimately give it 3.5 stars, and I think it's a fun ride and still worth reading. I then listened to If I Stay by Gayle Forman on audiobook. This I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I was going to. Many of you probably know what the premise is about, but basically a girl is in a car accident with her family and she is in a coma, but while she's in this coma she's having an out-of-body experience, and so during that time she kind of goes back and kind of has flashbacks to her past, before, and also is seeing stuff that's happening while she's in this coma. I really ended up enjoying this. This is really about family and friendships, but family especially, and I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting it to be more heavily focused on the romance element, and it wasn't. It was definitely in there, but it wasn't as heavily focused on that, so I actually really appreciated this one. I am giving it 4 stars. I'm going to be doing a review of the book as well as a movie review kind of coinciding with that, so definitely check that out if you're interested in my thoughts on the movie. I think the movie got a lot of things wrong, and I'm usually not very critical of movie adaptations, but I just think this one could have been way better. But anyway, I really enjoyed If I Stay as a book. I also finished The Lightning Thief by Riordan on audiobook this month, and you guys probably are going to absolutely take me out in the village circle and stone me, but I didn't end up enjoying this one very much. I still gave it 3 stars. I liked it in general. I think the audiobook is what the problem was. I hated the narrator of this audiobook. I thought he was so annoying. The voices he used were annoying, and well, at the same time, I feel bad kind of saying that because it is obviously a middle grade novel, so the narration was probably more for middle grade listeners, and so maybe it'd be more fun to middle grade readers. But man, I did not enjoy it, and it made me not really like the storyline. I, at this point, am not attached to Percy or Annabeth or any of anybody's faves in the story, and I just found it very predictable and a little just not believable. And I know that it's like about Greek mythology and people are like, it's not supposed to be believable, but it kind of is. I find some of my fantasy, like, I can believe that, but this was just like, I don't believe that a 12-year-old has defeated what, like 6, 7, 8 mythical beings at this point. Like, no, if this was a YA story, it would be the build-up to even one of these kind of creatures. So, right now, not really enjoying it, but I already have started listening to The Sea of Monsters on audiobook, so I'm going to continue with the series. I might stop listening to them on audiobook. The problem is that I don't really want to invest the time in reading them right now. I have so many books that are on my shelves that I want to read that I don't want to pick up those to read from like my library or something, so I'm listening to them on audiobook in my spare time. But I'm also really not enjoying the audiobook narrator. So we will see. I'm going to continue with the series. Do not worry, I don't hate it. It's just 3 stars. I don't really think it's as great as some people say that it is, and I wasn't as attached to like Percy and all the characters as I was like Harry when you start reading Harry Potter, which is a middle grade series at the beginning. So, yes, sorry. I'm still continuing. I'm actually really excited to get to the Heroes of Olympus series. That's why I'm reading the Percy Jackson series, because I really want to read the Heroes of Olympus series. So, I will finish it I promise, I'm sure it gets better. I then picked up Every Last Word by Tamara Ireland Stone. This was sent to me for review, and I ended up really enjoying this book. I've already done a review on that, which I will post on the screen as well as down below. I just adored this. This is about our main character, Sam, who has OCD. She has more of the obsessional form of OCD, so it's more of the obsessive thoughts than the actual compulsions to do stuff, kind of like we think of OCD. But it's basically her struggling with her OCD because she hasn't told anybody. She's in a group of kind of mean girl friends in high school, so she doesn't want to tell any of them. And it's kind of her coming into her own, discovering things about herself, about her OCD, and just kind of finding new friends. It's really about friendship at its core. There is a romance element in here, but it's really about the friendship and like self-discovery and like finding your passion and stuff like that. I just absolutely adored this book, and it just blew me out of the water, so I highly recommend picking this one up. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I then picked up Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. This is a new adult contemporary story. It is about our main character who is cheated on by her boyfriend with her best friend. And so she ends up moving in with a guy and a bunch of his roommates in the same apartment complex as her because she really has nowhere else to go. And kind of what happens there and the romance there. And it's complicated, as are every Colleen Hoover romance. It's complicated. This was so well done. I actually already read Hopeless before reading this, and I have a review which I will post. I did not like Hopeless pretty much at all. This blew me out of the water though. I absolutely adored it. One of the main themes in here is music, and there is a soundtrack that goes along with this that is posted online that you can listen to, and it just added so much. The characters I was so attached to. It was just pulling at my heartstrings. I read this in almost one sitting. I just could not put it down. And this really dealt with some difficult topics, and topics I know a lot of people wouldn't necessarily like reading about, in a way that was really well done. There's really no trigger warnings in here that I can remember, so it's not any of those kinds of topics, but just topics that not everybody really appreciates reading about, but it was done in a way that it was different, and it had a lot of grace, and I really appreciated it, and I just really enjoyed this. And I understand why people love Colleen Hoover now, because I was a little skeptical there for a second after Hopeless, but this definitely made up for it, and I cannot wait to read more of her books. Obviously, if I haven't said so already, 5 out of 5 stars. I then picked up Shades of Milk and Honey by Mary Robinette Kowal. I actually buddy read this with Risa. I will link her blog down below. She's awesome. It was a lot of fun talking to her about this book as I was reading, although we were reading it kind of at different times because the same week we were reading this, Orange is the New Black Season 3 dropped. So obviously that took precedent. But this is actually an adult fantasy novel. It is the first book in a 5-book series, I believe, and it's set in a Regency period, so Jane Austen period, and it's basically a Jane Austen novel with magic. That is pretty much the situation. You definitely have a more Pride and Prejudice type feeling with this book. It feels just like a Jane Austen novel with magic. So our main character is basically a spinster in here. She's about 27 or 28, and it's just her and her sister and her family, so her parents are concerned with marrying them off. This is the kind of typical Jane Austen story. The main magic system is glamour, and that's basically where people can manipulate things around them in different ways. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically it's like an everyday magic. It's not used for any kind of like combat or anything like that. It's basically used to make things prettier. It's used as like illusion and stuff like that. People do kind of like plays with glamour. People enhance their houses with glamour. They can enhance their looks. They can do all that kind of stuff, but it's not really like a sinister magic. It's more of a like nice magic. So our main character is a really accomplished glamorist. She's very good at it, even though she just does it as like a hobby. And so that is kind of what it revolves around. It's about her and how she looks at the world and the glamour and her sister's antics. And like I said, it's just basically a Jane Austen novel with magic. I absolutely adored this. If you're a fan of Jane Austen, you're going to like it. If you're not a fan of Jane Austen, you're not going to like it. But I gave this one 4.5 stars, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. I then read Anything Could Happen by Will Walton. I actually picked this up again at BEA. This was an art copy, but it has since been released. It was released in May. This is about a main character who is gay, but he is also in love with his best friend who is straight, and he hasn't come out to anybody. So it's pretty much a coming out story, and this guy kind of coming to terms with everything and telling people around him and stuff like that. I didn't end up enjoying this one very much. It's very short, so a lot of things didn't really get to be developed very much, and a lot of the situations were wrapped up very quickly, easily, and painlessly. I've actually written a review for this, which is posted on my blog, which I will link down below. So I liked it. I gave it about 2 stars. It was okay. I flew through it because it's very short, but overall, I think there's a lot of things that could have been done better and could have been fleshed out more, and it would have made it a really enjoyable story. I do want to give this arc a more loving home though, so I'll be giving this away on my Twitter. My Twitter is @ThoughtsOnTome. Sometime this week it will go up. It'll be like a flash 1 or 2 day giveaway, and then I'll pick a winner. So if you're interested in winning this book, definitely go and follow me on Twitter, and then you can be alerted when this book is being given away. I then finished Where She Went by Gayle Forman, also on audiobook. I was, again, surprised by this book. When I first started listening to this book, I actually wasn't sure if I was going to like it. It takes place in the perspective of a different character from the first book, and it takes place years later, and I wasn't sure if I was going to care about that character's perspective at all, but I actually ended up really enjoying it. Ultimately, at the end, I also gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, but for different reasons than I give If I Stay 4 out of 5 stars. So I end up really enjoying it. I'm going to do a full review on the duology in general, and you can hear more of my thoughts then, but I still really recommend it. If you liked If I Stay, then you'll probably like Where She Went, but probably for different reasons. And then, probably the highlight of my month, I reread The Kissa Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I read this last year. I will post my review for it on the screen as well as down below, but I adored it last year, and I adored it again. As you can see, I tabbed this book. And I have never tabbed a book in my life, but I decided on reread that I needed to tab this book. So I ran out and bought tabs so that I could tab it. And these are all the times that I can prove my ship is endgame. No, it's not just ship stuff, but a lot of it is ship stuff. A lot of it is couple stuff. For those of you that don't know, this is our main character, Leah, and she's being married away to a prince from another kingdom who she's never met, doesn't want to do it. Pretty typical, but she ends up running away to escape this fate. And the prince that she was supposed to marry ends up following her, as well as an assassin from another country sent to kill her. So you as a reader don't know who is who. Leah doesn't know who's who, or that they're actually those people at all. She just thinks they're guys that showed up at this village that she's in. So the first part of the book is all about kind of figuring out this situation, this kind of love triangle. I'm not the biggest fan of love triangles, but this love triangle is like the holy love triangle. It is beautiful, so well done. Both characters are super strong. The lead of Leah is super strong. Everyone is strong in the love triangle, so it works out beautifully. It's amazing. But the first half is all about that, and then the reveal happens about halfway through, and you get to kind of see a lot of political stuff and dynamics and what's going on in this world, and things are just not as they seem. There's a lot more going on, and I just love it. I was really scared to reread this book. I kept putting it off, because whenever I reread a favorite of mine, I just get nervous that I'm not going to like it as much. And this one I read shortly after joining BookTube last year, and I've read so much more since then, so I was just nervous that it wasn't going to live up to like my love of it from last year, but it definitely did. After the first chapter, I was rehooked again and just flew through it. I absolutely adore this book, and the second book, The Heart of Betrayal, comes out this month in like a week, and I am so excited, so I will be picking that up as soon as it arrives. I've already pre-ordered it. I pre-ordered it way back when I read this book last year, so I cannot wait. I am so excited. Obviously, 5 out of 5 stars, again. I then picked up None of the Above by I.W. Gregorio. This is a YA contemporary story about a main character who is intersex. And intersex was something that I thought I knew about. I've taken human sexuality courses, stuff like that, but I really had no idea, and this book brought so much light to it, and I absolutely adored it. Kristen is our main character, and she discovers at the very beginning of the book that she is intersex, and then is outed basically to the rest of the school, so she's just kind of coming to terms with that, coming to terms with kind of coming out, even though she didn't want to, and like bullying, and just figuring out everything about this identification that she has now, and what that means to be intersex. Intersex exists on a spectrum, so I'm not an expert in any way about it, but this book definitely helped fill me in, and I looked up more about it. But basically it exists on a spectrum, so there's many different ways that intersex can manifest, and there's different chromosomal disorders that exist on the spectrum, so it manifests itself in different ways. But basically, people that are intersex have both chromosomes, or they have characteristics from one sex and then have the chromosomes of another, etc., etc. She ends up having a form of intersex where she looks like a female, but she has no uterus, and she actually has testicles that are up in her kind of stomach area, and she has chromosomes that are male. So she looks female, she presents as female, she feels female, and she kind of identifies as female, but at the same time she also has different male biology. This book was really wonderful. Again, another thing that I tabbed. It really balanced the educational elements of it with the fictional elements. This author is actually a surgeon, and she's had intersex patients in her practice and stuff. So she really knows a lot about it. She's one of the leaders of the hashtag We Need Diverse Books. So she's really involved with the community. Even though the author herself is not intersex, she really worked a lot with the intersex community, and it was just a really beautiful book, and you learn a ton, and it's really a kind of thing that you don't hear about. I know of 2 other books Golden Boy by, I forget the author, I'll put it right here, and Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides are two other books that have intersex main characters, but those are the only ones that I know about. I now plan on reading those as well because I'm very interested in it. But this is a kind of classification on the LGBTQ spectrum that you don't hear much about, and it's really wonderful to get this. The only complaint that I have is that I wish we could have seen a little more after the aftermath of all of this is kind of worn down, kind of like an epilogue or something with her later on, because you really get to see the full storm going on when all of this kind of happens and she finds everything out. I would have liked to see stuff a little bit after, but ultimately I really ended up enjoying this, and I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read this month was A Book of Spirits and Thieves by Morgan Rhodes. This is the first book in a prequel trilogy that goes with Fallen Kingdoms, like a prequel companion series. This takes place in the Fallen Kingdoms world thousands of years before the Fallen Kingdom story. It also is tied into modern day Toronto. So we have 3 main characters. 2 of them are living in modern day Toronto, and 1 of them is living in the Fallen Kingdom's world years and years and years before the Fallen Kingdom situations are going on. One day, one of our main characters ends up having a book delivered to her bookstore. She ends up opening it, and when her sister touches it, her sister's spirit is kind of pushed back into the Fallen Kingdom's world, and everything kind of takes off from there. There's all these things going on with the Fallen Kingdom's world and the modern world, and there's a secret society that kind of ties everything together in modern world. I end up really enjoying this. I will say, read Fallen Kingdoms and the 3 released Fallen Kingdoms books, Fallen Kingdoms, Rebel Spring, and Gathering Darkness, before you read this. If I would have read this before reading those books, I wouldn't have had really much attachment to it. I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much, because a lot of the backstory and a lot of the things that you really didn't know to really enjoy this book happen in Fallen Kingdoms, because there's so many connections to Fallen Kingdoms and things as far as this being a prequel and the backstory and just hints and just a lot of different Easter eggs for Fallen Kingdoms. So I would definitely recommend to read Fallen Kingdoms before you read this. Read the whole series that's released so far, and then read this, because otherwise I just don't think you're going to enjoy it as much, but I end up really enjoying it. I don't love it as much as I love Fallen Kingdoms yet, because Fallen Kingdoms, those characters are my babies, and I've had more time with them. But I really enjoyed a lot of the characters in here. I'm interested to see what happens with a lot of them, and I'm interested to see the character development that we're going to get throughout the series. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Alright guys, that is it for June. Comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them, and also what your favorite read of this month was. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!